Indian Stock Market Review for March 3rd, 2021. This is Arvi Ramachandran. In this video, we're going to look at two indexes. The first is the Nifty 50. After that, we will look at the Nifty Bank Index. And then we will look at three very large companies. The first is ICICI Bank. Then we'll look at Infosys, and we will end the video with a look at Reliance Industries. After this video, you should leave with a pretty good understanding about where we stand here in the Indian stock market. As always, feel free to leave any comments in the comments section below. So let's go ahead and jump into it, and we will look at the Nifty 50 first. So this is the weekly and daily chart here for the Nifty 50. I first want to briefly walk through what we have on this chart so that we are all on the same page. On the left side is our weekly chart. We have our askSlim momentum shown here. When it is negative, it'll be purple, and when it is positive, it'll be green. We also have these manually drawn tools here. These are called cycle brackets or time cycles, and they are a way for us to visualize the money flow patterns. We look for cycle lows to form around the troughs of cycles, so that means around this period right here. Once we form those cycle lows, we would enter into a rising phase, and in a rising phase, this is where you would look for money flows to come in and for rallies on the upside. And in the later stages of an idealized cycle, this is where you look for money flows to come out and for sell-offs on the downside. On the right side of the chart, this is where we have our daily cycles, and we have those cycle brackets drawn here at the bottom. We also have our slim ribbon here, which is our primary tool for our daily momentum. And at the bottom, we have the slim ribbon PO, which is a proprietary indicator for askSlim level 4 members. And what it does is it provides momentum continuation signals in the context of the slim ribbon. So when the slim ribbon, which is a combination of the 8, 13, and 21 EMA, is positive, it'll be colored green, and you look for these bullish signals to show up here with these green arrows. And what that says is after a green arrow, the odds favor continuation in that upside momentum. And conversely, when the slim ribbon will be red, you will see this will be colored red, and you would get down arrows, which would indicate a likelihood of continuation in downside momentum. So that's the overall look at some of the indicators and drawing tools that we have on this chart. I just wanted to do that so that we are all on the same page. So for the Nifty Bank Index, we are in this very bullish pattern here. We formed a swamped cycle, as I've noted here, which means that we used up this whole cycle rallying. And when that happens, it leaves a very short window of time for a pullback, which is what we got right here. And once we form that next key low, we would look for a new swing high to form in this next cycle, which is really what happened here. And then some. We have rallied for most of this cycle here so far, and we also have very positive upside momentum here as well. So all of this is really very positive. So what are we looking for on the upside? Overall, we're looking for a test of this 127.2 fib here, which comes in at 16,238. So that's the overall target here for the Nifty 50. If we transition over to the daily chart, we have these green and red arrows. I just want to first walk through what this is. A green arrow indicates that we have formed a positive cycle. What is a positive cycle? A positive cycle indicates that we formed a cycle low that was higher than the prior cycle low, and a cycle high that was higher than the prior cycle high. What that says is that the underlying cycle structure is very positive, and we will look for new swing highs to form in the next cycles. So for instance, we had a pullback right here and formed that cycle low, right? And you can see that. We would look for a new swing high to form in this next cycle, which it did, right? And in each of these cycles that were positive, we formed new swing highs. So what's happening right now is that we are forming one more positive cycle here. What we're looking for is for just one more dip on the downside, likely to this short-term 38.2, which comes in at around 14,738, and the short-term 50 is around 14,525. So that zone here is where we will look for a pullback into, and that would be into the middle of March time frame, and then look for another push back up. And I want to zoom in a bit on these time frame here so you can see some of these targets. So on the upside, we have a 127.2 at 15,660 and a 161.8 at 16,221. So that's really what we will look for, likely by early to mid-April in the Nifty 50. So I hope that was helpful to walk through the overall picture here for the Nifty 50. Let's go ahead and look at the Nifty Bank Index next. So this is the Nifty Bank Index, and what's formed here is that you can see this very large sell-off that we had here, right? And then we form this really nice basing cycle. A basing cycle forms when you have a cycle low that forms higher than the prior cycle low, and the base gets confirmed when you get above that prior cycle high. Now note what happened when we did that. That really set off a really bullish move here on the upside from around 25,300 to almost 38,000. So a beautiful move on the upside that was all set up from that cycle base. So I just wanted to highlight that. So right now we are getting late in this intermediate term rising phase. We're looking for a high to form and then to get a mild pullback. Now, why do I say mild? Well, we have used most of this cycle rallying, so that doesn't leave a whole lot of time here for a move on the downside. And if we did get a move on the downside, we will look for that to then get bought and then look for new swing highs to form in this next cycle that goes down into April and May of this year. So on the downside, we will look for a test of this intermediate term 23.6, which comes in at around 33,500 or so. If we look at the daily chart, you can see that we are in this short-term rising phase and looking for a high to form and then get into a pullback here into this next short-term timing. The next low is due right around the end of March to early April, which is very much in line with our weekly timing as well. So we look for a high to form relatively shortly and then to get a pullback. Now on the downside, we have a short-term 38.2 at around 34,600 and a short-term 50, which comes in at around 33,700. So that's really the zone on the downside that we will look for the Nifty Bank Index here, and then we will look for a move back to the upside here. So this is a very positive overall pattern, and I just want to make sure I emphasize that. Now let's go ahead and look at ICICI Bank. Now, just as a note, ICICI Bank is one of the largest underlying components of the Nifty Bank Index, has right around a 20% weighting. So just wanted to add that in as well. So you can see this beautiful basing cycle that formed right here, and I have added that note, and see what happened when we moved through that old high. We absolutely blasted off from around 420 up to over around 680. So it was a beautiful move here on the upside and basically straight up. And note that the weekly momentum stayed positive the entire way. So you can see how important it is to track momentum in your trading and analysis. So what's going on now is that we have used up this whole cycle basically rallying. It leaves a short window of time for a pullback, and then we will look for a move back to new swing highs in this next intermediate term rising phase that goes out into April and May of this year. So a very positive pattern here in ICICI Bank. We will look for a test of this intermediate term 23.6 at around 600 or so. And then a move back to the upside. If we look on the daily chart, you'll see that we had formed this mid-cycle low here and got into a rally off of this mid-cycle low, and that's this rally that we're in. Now, this dominant cycle here is really due to form a high. So we would look for this little bit of a rally to then roll back down on the downside and get a test of this short-term 38.2 to the short-term 50. So that's around 600 to around 570. That would be the zone that we will look for into the end of March timeframe, and then look for a move back up after that. So that's the overall picture here in ICICI Bank. We will look for a failure likely in this short-term 50 to the short-term 61.8. So that's around 635 to around 645. Look for a failure in that zone, and then one more move back down, and that'll likely set up a nice move back up. So a beautiful picture here of ICICI Bank. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. This is Infosys. So this is Infosys, the weekly and daily. On the left, we have a swamp cycle that formed here. And you can see we had very little time to get a pullback. Just formed a little bit of a bull flag that then sharply turned back up as we entered into a new rising phase here. So that worked out perfectly. Then note this little bull triangle that formed here. I've highlighted it in blue. This is a really nice consolidation pattern to monitor for. You want to see a breakout from that triangle, and you can see the breakout that we got at around 1150, and we went straight up to almost 1400. So that was a beautiful move out of that triangle. I'm just highlighting these patterns so that way you can monitor them on your own charts. They show up all the time. You can see that there is one more triangle basically forming here, and we are just now breaking out on the upside. Why are we breaking out on the upside? Well, we had a cycle low due. The cycle low was due right around the early to middle part of February, and you can see that we are very early, very likely in a new rising phase on the intermediate term. So what are we looking for on the upside? We have a fib level here at 1389. If it gets through that, we will look for a test of this 127.2 at 1519. A beautiful pattern here in Infosys. If we look at the daily chart, we have a dominant daily cycle here, which is then broken up into these minor half cycles. And you can see we formed a bottom basically right on time. I have left in these vertical timelines so you can see where the key daily cycle lows formed relative to the idealized timing, which means relative to the troughs of these cycles. And if I zoom out on this chart, I just want to do this briefly, you can see that these are really pretty consistent, very close to the idealized timing. So that is very good to see. So let's modify this axis here. So what we're looking for is a test of this old high at first around 1392. If it gets through that level, we have these targets here at 1420 and 1470. So a beautiful pattern here in Infosys, and very early, very likely in a new intermediate term rising phase. The last one we're going to look at here is Reliance Industries. And this is also a beautiful pattern here. We have a dominant weekly cycle, which is then broken up into minor thirds. And I want to highlight these minor thirds because they are actually quite clear. So let's look back to 2019. We had two cycles pushing up here, with the dominant cycle pushing up as well as the minor cycle pushing up. This is a very powerful time period. This is where you look for large impulses on the upside, and you can see the nice move we had. And then we had a very mild pullback right here to form that minor cycle low, and you can see that. And then we had a rally. And then we had a pullback into this next minor cycle low. And now what's going on with this dominant cycle is that this cycle has now turned down. So we would look for this minor cycle to fail. And you can see all it did is just form a little bit of a bear flag that then sharply turned down. So that really played out beautifully. After that, we had two cycles pushing up, with the dominant cycle pushing up as well as the minor cycle. And you can see the rally that we had for almost this whole way up here. And then you can see the pullback that we had right here. This is what formed the minor cycle. Then we had the rally here, and then we had a pullback into this next minor cycle low. And where are we in this dominant cycle? This cycle has now turned down, and you can see that this time period, we really wouldn't look for a rally to hold. So we got a bit of a rally, but it really couldn't get anywhere. And then we had a pullback on the downside to finish out this cycle. So that really played out nice. So what's going on here is that we are in this intermediate term rising phase here, and still early in this rising phase. Our weekly momentum is firmly pointed up, as you can see right here. So this is overall a very positive condition, and some of the evidence favors new swing highs to form here relative to this old high at 2369. So that's really what we're looking at. If we look at the daily chart here, I just want to modify this axis so we can see the cycles here. There you go. So what's going on here is, if I just modify this so it's visible, Okay, so we are in this short-term rising phase here in Reliance Industries. The upside target here in the very short term is this 2254 level. And then if I bring this over, you can see what we're looking for here. So what we're looking for is a test of this 2254 level and then a pullback into this next dominant cycle timing here on the daily, which comes in at around the middle to end of April. And then this is where we look for that next larger impulse here on the upside. So overall, a very positive pattern in Reliance Industries. So that is our look at the 2 indexes as well as 3 stocks. I hope you found this video helpful and it gave you a good sense for where we stand in the Indian stock market. As always, we would love to hear your comments. Feel free to post them in the comment section below, and make sure to like this video as well if you found it valuable. Thanks again and have a great day.